Picture this. You are sitting in a pretty high-stakes meeting.
The kind where your palms are actively sweating.
Exactly. The room is packed. Or maybe you are staring at an endless grid of video squares on a call. And your boss, or perhaps a major client, turns directly to you.
Right.
And they ask a highly specific, highly consequential question about the projected outcome of a project you are spearheading.
And the room just goes dead quiet.
Dead quiet. All eyes are on you. And the truth is, you genuinely, absolutely do not know the answer.
It is, it's the ultimate nightmare scenario.
It really is. Your mind is racing. Do you fake it? Do you project unwavering authority and just, hazard a guess?
Or do you admit ignorance and risk looking like you are completely out of your depth?
It is a universally terrifying moment, and it is exactly what we are going to dissect today. Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Thanks for having me.
Our mission today is entirely focused on learning the actual data-backed science of communicating doubt.
Because it is a situation every single professional faces, and the stakes are often incredibly high.
Right.
What we are looking at today is a rigorous piece of research that provides a tangible toolkit for navigating these exact moments.
And we really want you to walk away having learned how to handle this.
We are drawing from a 2024 paper published in the Quarterly Journal of Experimental Psychology. It's authored by Eric Løhre and Løhre and Teigen.
And the title is, let me get this right, When Leaders Disclose Uncertainty, Effects of Expressing Internal and External Uncertainty About a Decision.
That's the one. These researchers conducted a series of 5 detailed psychological experiments. They really wanted to explore the mechanics of what they call the dilemma of uncertainty.
Okay, let's unpack this, because this isn't just about reading a script in a boardroom.
No, not at all.
This is about learning how human beings fundamentally process confidence and doubt, because we are operating in a world that is inherently unpredictable.
Completely. And the paper specifically contextualizes this by mentioning major global environments where leaders face just immense pressure to make decisions with imperfect information.
Right, they talk about managing the complexities of the COVID-19 pandemic.
And navigating long-term projections of climate change.
Or dealing with shifting geopolitical risks. And to be absolutely clear here, we are not taking any political stances on those specific issues today.
No, of course not. We are simply recognizing them for what the researchers point out they are.
Right.
They are highly complex, volatile environments where the people in charge are forced to make massive decisions while dealing with a staggering amount of unknown variables.
Those examples really serve as the ultimate backdrop for this dilemma. I mean, a leader is, by definition, expected to guide others through the unknown.
Yes. But the public, or shareholders, or voters, or even just your immediate team members, they naturally crave certainty.
We all do. We want to feel secure in the direction being taken.
Exactly. So the leader is caught in this trap. Decision-making in highly uncertain environments is basically the core job description.
Yeah.
Yet they are simultaneously expected to constantly exude confidence.
It's a paradox. If you admit that you don't know how things will play out, the question becomes, do you inherently lose the trust of your followers?
And Løhre and Teigen wanted to determine if the specific words we choose, literally down to the very pronouns we use, can mitigate that reputational damage while still maintaining honesty.
Which is huge.
Yeah.
And throughout this discussion, I really want you, the listener, to remember that we are all operating as leaders in our own domains.
Absolutely. You don't need a CEO title.
Right. You might be managing a corporate division, sure. But you might also be pitching a freelance design, or advising a peer, or navigating a complex family decision.
Projecting competence and persuading others is just a daily requirement of life.
So learning how to navigate this linguistic dilemma is an essential life skill.
It really is. And the baseline problem the researchers identify stems from what they call implicit leadership theories.
Which basically dictate our subconscious expectations of authority figures.
Right. Implicit leadership theories suggest that the prototypical leader is industrious, determined, and above all, confident.
When you close your eyes and picture a leader, the mental image is rarely someone expressing bewilderment.
No, or hesitation. The expectation is absolute conviction, and this stems directly from a cognitive mechanism known as the confidence heuristic.
The confidence heuristic, let's break that down, because learning how this works is step 1.
So we operate in environments overloaded with information. The brain constantly seeks ways to conserve energy.
It loves a shortcut.
It does. When evaluating a speaker, listeners rarely have the time or the expertise to fact-check every single claim.
I mean, I certainly don't in half my meetings.
Right. So the confidence heuristic dictates that listeners use a speaker's level of confidence as a direct proxy for their competence.
If you sound entirely sure of yourself, the default assumption is that you actually possess the requisite expertise.
Exactly. The logic assumes an alignment between knowledge and conviction.
And from an evolutionary perspective, that makes total sense, reacting quickly to a confident warning.
Like someone shouting about a predator in the bushes.
Yeah, that prioritizes survival over, checking their credentials.
Right. You don't ask for a peer-reviewed study when a tiger is jumping at you.
But in a modern professional environment, relying on this heuristic actively rewards overconfidence.
It creates a substantial systemic issue. The researchers highlight this explicitly. The interpersonal and professional advantages of appearing confident are massive.
Even when that confidence is completely unjustified.
Exactly. The literature consistently shows that confident advisors are rated as more trustworthy and their advice is followed more frequently.
They even mention courtrooms, right?
Yes. Even in high-stakes environments like that, eyewitness testimonies are given disproportionate weight by juries if they are delivered with absolute certainty.
Completely independent of the witness's actual accuracy.
Right. This dynamic elevates individuals who simply act certain to higher social status and positions of authority.
The paper connects this dynamic directly to systemic issues in the workplace, specifically mentioning the confidence gap.
They cite research exploring how this confidence heuristic exacerbates the lack of female leaders and actually widens the gender pay gap.
How so?
Well, the data suggests that men, on average, are more likely to display overconfidence in professional settings. Women tend to remain more modest or realistic about their actual abilities.
And because organizational structures unknowingly rely on the confidence heuristic to evaluate talent,
Overconfident individuals are disproportionately promoted and compensated.
they project certainty, while equally or honestly, more competent individuals who display realistic modesty are passed over.
We are systematically rewarding individuals for bluffing because our cognitive architecture favors the sound of a confident voice.
Which is wild to think about. And the inverse of this is what they call the competence penalty.
Right. This occurs when a leader deviates from the expected script and admits doubt.
The paper references a 2020 study by Kojoharenko and Karalaya that perfectly illustrates this penalty.
It really does. They examined how leaders are perceived simply for asking
It's
questions.
just for asking questions.
Yes. Participants evaluated a leader presenting a tentative conclusion. So something like, we can lower costs by reducing suppliers.
Okay, a standard statement.
Right. Then they compared it to presenting the exact same information as a question. Can we lower costs by reducing suppliers?
Just changing the inflection at the end, basically.
And the results indicated that the mere act of asking a question, which inherently signals a need for input or a slight degree of uncertainty, resulted in a direct and measurable hit to the leader's perceived competence.
That highlights a really harsh reality about how tentative phrasing is perceived. Seeking input is actively penalized on the competence metric.
It is. While asking questions provided a minor boost in perceived humility, the core trait of competence took a significant hit.
Wow.
The baseline reality for anyone navigating a professional environment is that certainty is rewarded and admitting doubt is punished.
And this is the exact tension Løhre and Teigen are trying to address.
Yeah.
Their major breakthrough lies in asking whether the specific framing of the uncertainty alters the severity of that competence penalty.
And they introduce this concept of the grammar of doubt.
The grammar of doubt. I love that phrasing. They differentiate between two basic forms of uncertainty derived from probability theory.
Right, and this linguistic nuance shifts the entire framing of accountability. It relies on a subtle shift in pronouns that dramatically alters the psychological landscape of the conversation.
And honestly, I have to say, I am absolutely fascinated by this linguistic nuance. It is just one tiny pronoun shifting, but it changes literally everything.
What's fascinating here is how deeply rooted this distinction is in the philosophy of probability, yet how rarely it is consciously applied to everyday communication and leadership strategy.
Okay, so let's teach this. What are the two types?
The two types are internal uncertainty, which is referred to as epistemic uncertainty, and external uncertainty, referred to as aleatory uncertainty.
Internal or epistemic uncertainty is subjective. It reflects a personal lack of knowledge, an information deficit, or a low degree of personal belief.
Right.
And the standard phrasing relies on the first-person pronoun, I am uncertain.
If we look at the analogy from the literature, it is like looking at a multiple-choice history question. The historical fact is fixed in the universe.
The answer is already out there.
Exactly. The uncertainty exists solely because the individual taking the test lacks the knowledge.
Precisely. When an individual states, I am uncertain, they are signaling a personal deficit to their audience. They are locating the lack of clarity within their own intellect.
Contrast that with external or aleatory uncertainty.
Right.
This refers to objective factors in the outside world. Randomness, systemic complexity, or indeterminacy in the environment itself.
So the phrasing shifts to the external pronoun, it is uncertain.
The classic analogy is the flipping of a coin. Before the coin lands, the outcome is unknown to everyone. The uncertainty does not stem from a lack of knowledge.
You couldn't study harder to know the answer.
Exactly. It is an inherent property of the physical system.
I am uncertain indicates a weakness in the speaker. It is uncertain indicates complexity in the world.
The latter phrasing unites the speaker and the listener against an unpredictable universe, rather than isolating the speaker as ignorant.
The implications for professional communication here are profound.
They are. Because if the negative effects of expressing uncertainty are tied to appearing unknowledgeable, then framing the uncertainty as an external objective fact should theoretically protect the leader's reputation.
The message becomes, the leader is not incompetent. The situation is simply inherently unpredictable.
And that formed the core hypothesis of the paper. Will leaders be perceived as less competent when expressing uncertainty, and will that competence penalty be significantly mitigated by using external rather than internal language?
Okay, so to test this, the researchers designed studies 1 and 2.
Right.
They recruited over 600 participants from the UK and Ireland via Prolific, which ensures a robust adult sample rather than relying solely on undergraduate students, which we see a lot in these kinds of studies.
It gives the data much more real-world weight.
Definitely. So the first scenario asks participants to evaluate the CEO of a tech company. This CEO is managing 2 ongoing innovation projects, Project A and Project B.
But budget constraints allow investment in only one.
Right. The CEO reads an evaluation report and emails the team with a final decision.
And the manipulation here centers on whether the CEO expresses certainty or uncertainty, and whether they use internal or external language.
The phrasing in these conditions is incredibly precise. Let me read the exact quotes from the study.
Go for it.
So imagine I'm the CEO. In the internal uncertainty condition, I email the team and say, the evaluation report shows that both projects have their pros and cons, and I am quite uncertain which project has the greater promise. However, I have decided that we will invest in Project A.
And in the external uncertainty condition, the grammar shifts.
Right. So as a CEO, I would say, the evaluation report shows that both projects have their pros and cons, and it is quite uncertain which project has the greater promise. However, I've decided that we will invest in Project A.
Participants then rated the CEO on a 7-point scale. They measured perceived competence, confidence, the amount of thought put into the decision, and overall leadership quality.
And the researchers replicated this exact structure in a second scenario, this time featuring a minister of health, choosing between 2 strategies to handle a multi-resistant bacteria outbreak.
Another highly complex decision where the leader expressed either internal or external uncertainty.
So what happened?
Well, the results confirm the baseline reality. The confidence heuristic is incredibly stubborn.
Shocking.
Leaders expressing certainty, whether saying, I am quite certain or it is quite certain, receive the highest competence ratings across all conditions.
So faking it still kind of works.
Unfortunately, yes. However, the critical finding emerged when leaders were forced to express uncertainty. The external phrase, it is uncertain, resulted in a significantly smaller competence penalty than the internal phrase, I am uncertain.
The pre-registered replication in Study 2 yielded an effect size of D equals 0.45, which is a solid, medium effect size demonstrating that a simple pronoun shift reliably alters human perception of a leader's competence.
Listeners are highly sensitive to that linguistic signal regarding whether the uncertainty resides in the world or within the leader's mind.
What do you make of that? Why are we so sensitive to it?
I think this maps perfectly onto the fundamental attribution error. Human beings are highly attuned to allocating blame.
We always want to know whose fault it is.
Exactly. When a leader states, I am uncertain, they are internalizing the attribution for the lack of clarity. They invite observers to judge their intellect.
And if the subsequent project fails, the retrospective judgment is harsh because the leader admitted a personal deficit right out of the gate.
Conversely, stating it is uncertain frames the unpredictability as an environmental hazard. If the project fails, observers are more likely to attribute the failure to market chaos or systemic complexity.
The leader preemptively shifts the attribution of failure from their own competence to the environment. That is so strategic.
It represents a highly practical linguistic tool.
So when you are confronted with an unknown, shifting from "I am not sure" to "the data is currently inconclusive" or "the market trends are uncertain," states a fact about the world rather than a flaw in the speaker.
Exactly. You are protecting your competence. But the boundary conditions of this linguistic trick become particularly apparent when a leader doesn't actually have to make an immediate choice.
Right, because in studies 1 and 2, the leader expressed uncertainty but forced a decision anyway. They picked Project A no matter what.
In the real world, uncertainty frequently triggers a different behavioral response. Which brings us to study 3, which introduces the variable of decision avoidance.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the optimal leadership move is sometimes just to delay.
Yes, study 3 introduces the CEO of a construction company evaluating 2 sustainability strategies. Strategy A involves experimental building materials, and strategy B focuses on site recycling.
The CEO receives a consultant report, and the researchers maintain the manipulation of internal versus external uncertainty.
However, they introduced a behavioral manipulation. Half the participants read that the CEO made an active choice despite the uncertainty. The other half read that the CEO postponed the decision, directing consultants to gather more information.
They opted for decision avoidance. And the impact on the competence penalty for those who postponed was dramatic.
The competence penalty vanished entirely.
Vanished.
Completely. Leaders who decided to gather more information were rated significantly higher in competence than those who made an active choice while uncertain, yielding a large effect size of D equals 0.70.
That is huge.
Crucially, the distinction between internal and external uncertainty evaporated in the postponement scenario. Whether the CEO used "I am uncertain" or "it is uncertain," following it with a directive to gather more information resulted in highly competent ratings.
The psychology of decision avoidance is often associated with negative traits like indecisiveness. Yet here, it functions as a total competence booster.
Because gathering information in this context is viewed as a highly rational problem-solving response to an acknowledged unknown.
That makes a lot of sense.
The literature refers to this as choosing not to choose. If an optimal path is unclear, the logical progression is not to force a commitment, but to systematically reduce the uncertainty.
The paper notes that in complex domains, uncertainty is widely recognized as a valid justification for delaying major actions. Observers respect a leader who identifies a knowledge gap and initiates an action plan to resolve it.
The application here requires situational awareness.
Definitely. If forced to make an immediate call, external uncertainty, like saying the market is uncertain, provides reputational armor.
But if time permits, either phrasing works, provided it is immediately followed by a plan to resolve the doubt, like saying, "I am uncertain about these projections, so I am initiating a secondary model review."
The competence is derived from actively managing the uncertainty rather than passively suffering from it.
Study 3 also probed a secondary question that exposes a profound contradiction in cognitive processing, what the researchers termed the paradox of prescribed optimism.
Let's talk about this paradox, because the researchers explicitly asked the participants to state their preferences regarding leadership communication.
Right. After evaluating the scenarios, participants were asked a direct question. If a CEO faces a choice between alternatives and the optimal path is uncertain, do you prefer a leader who is open and honest about the uncertainty, or one who downplays it and communicates certainty?
And the overwhelming majority explicitly stated a preference for honesty. Up to 67% of participants claimed they wanted a leader who communicates uncertainty openly rather than projecting unwarranted confidence.
Yet, studies 1 and 2 definitively demonstrated that these same individuals actively apply a competence penalty when a leader actually demonstrates that honesty.
Crazy.
This contradiction highlights the tension between stated preferences and revealed preferences.
What we say we want versus what we actually reward.
Exactly. On a conscious, philosophical level, individuals value transparency and authenticity. But on a subconscious, heuristic level, the lack of conviction triggers cognitive alarm bells, causing listeners to judge the vulnerable leader as less effective.
I want you listening to really reflect on this in your own behavior. How often do we demand transparency from our bosses or politicians, insisting on the truth, only to criticize them for looking weak when they actually give it to us.
We actively penalize the exact behavior we request.
It is a profound hypocrisy, and it perfectly explains the persistence of the confidence gap. Leaders are implicitly trained that the public demand for honesty is a trap. Revealing doubt incurs a penalty. Faking certainty yields professional advancement.
To further isolate this tension between perceived competence and perceived honesty, the researchers utilized a within-subjects design in Study 4.
So up to this point, participants evaluated a single leader in isolation. The within-subjects design in Study 4 places the two linguistic approaches side by side.
Forcing the participant to evaluate them concurrently.
Right. Participants read descriptions of two managers in a large tech company. Manager A states, "It is very uncertain which of the two projects has greater promise, but I have decided we will invest in Project X."
And Manager B states, "I am very uncertain which of the two projects has greater promise, but I have decided we will invest in Project Y."
So one external, one internal. Participants then directly answered two questions. Which manager seems more competent and which seems more honest?
And the results cleanly bifurcated the two traits. Manager A, utilizing external uncertainty, was rated significantly more competent. Manager B, utilizing internal uncertainty, was rated significantly more honest.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this touches on the foundational dimensions of social cognition, how we continuously evaluate other human beings along two specific axes.
This aligns perfectly with decades of social psychology research, heavily pioneered by Susan Fiske. When evaluating an individual, cognitive processing rapidly assesses two primary dimensions: warmth and competence.
Warmth and competence.
Warmth evaluates intentions. Is this person friendly, trustworthy, authentic, and moral? Competence evaluates capability. Does this person have the intelligence and effectiveness to carry out their intentions?
And these dimensions frequently operate in tension, don't they?
They do. Asserting immense competence can inadvertently signal a lack of warmth, making an individual appear cold or unapproachable. Conversely, demonstrating high vulnerability increases warmth and trustworthiness, but often at the expense of perceived capability.
Utilizing internal uncertainty, I am uncertain, incurs a competence penalty, but earns what they call an honesty premium.
It strips away the corporate armor, signaling human limitation and vulnerability, which builds deep interpersonal trust.
But utilizing external uncertainty, it is uncertain, maintains the armor. It protects the speaker's status as a capable analyst of a complex environment, but registers as slightly colder and more distant.
It provides a highly nuanced strategic toolkit. Leadership requires adaptability. The operative question becomes, in this specific context, which asset is most critical to project?
Right, let's walk through how to use this toolkit. Consider a project manager pitching a multi-million-dollar strategy to skeptical investors during market volatility. Guarantees are impossible.
In that high-stakes scenario, the primary requirement is projecting authority and capability to secure investor confidence. Heavy utilization of external uncertainty is optimal.
So you would say something like, the macroeconomic environment is currently highly uncertain and supply chain disruptions are inherently unpredictable. However, based on our modeling, this strategy provides the most robust path.
Exactly. The risk is acknowledged, maintaining intellectual honesty. But the unpredictability is firmly located in the environment, safeguarding your competence.
Okay, conversely, consider a one-on-one performance review with a demoralized team member following a project failure. Rebuilding cohesion and trust is the primary objective here.
In that case, doubling down on competence via externalization might further alienate the team member. It can appear as an attempt to dodge accountability.
So the honesty premium of internal uncertainty becomes far more valuable.
Yes. You might say, I am honestly uncertain about where we went wrong. I didn't see that complication coming, and I am struggling to map out the next step, but we will figure it out together.
That admission of internal deficit sacrifices the infallible letter myth, but generates immense authenticity, vulnerability, and interpersonal trust.
Selecting the appropriate pronoun depends entirely on whether the situation requires a shield or an open hand.
That is such a great way to put it, a shield or an open hand. But to determine if these experimental findings translate from lay people evaluating hypotheticals to actual corporate behavior, we really have to examine Study 5.
Study 5 is crucial because it analyzes the behavior of practicing managers. The researchers shifted the methodology entirely.
They recruited 301 actual managers across the UK, US, Australia, and other regions.
And this sample spanned lower-level supervisors to upper-level executives in massive organizations.
Real people with real authority.
Right. The prompt required these managers to recall a specific real-world instance where they had to make a decision while uncertain about the optimal path.
The critical inquiry was their behavioral response. Did they disclose the uncertainty to their team, or did they conceal it?
The self-reporting data revealed that 52.5% claimed they provided an honest portrayal of their uncertainty.
Meaning almost half didn't.
A significant portion admitted to deliberately omitting or actively downplaying it. And notably, out of the 301 managers, only one individual admitted to overstating their uncertainty.
Only one. The paper's most revealing finding here correlates the manager's willingness to disclose doubt with their private perception of that doubt's origin.
Managers were asked to classify the nature of their recalled uncertainty. Was it perceived as an objective fact about the environment, or a subjective feeling and knowledge gap?
External versus internal again.
Exactly. The statistical analysis demonstrated a robust pattern. The more a manager perceived the uncertainty as an objective fact or external, the higher their willingness to share it.
But the more they perceived it as a subjective knowledge gap or internal, the more actively they concealed it.
Without explicit knowledge of epistemic versus aleatory probability, these experienced managers instinctively operated by the rule. Externalizing blame is safe. Internalizing a knowledge deficit is dangerous.
They intuitively anticipated the differential effects demonstrated in studies 1 and 2. They understood that revealing internal uncertainty damages perceived competence, while revealing external uncertainty frames them as objective analysts of complex data.
The demographic breakdown of this study also provided fascinating insights regarding experience levels and organizational scale.
What did they find there?
The data indicated that managers with greater tenure, as well as those operating within larger organizations, exhibited significantly less anxiety regarding the disclosure of uncertainty.
Why do you think that is?
They anticipated fewer negative consequences, such as being labeled indecisive, and expected more positive outcomes, such as being viewed as honest and adequately preparing their teams for multiple contingencies.
So what does this all mean? It suggests that a high tolerance for the unknown is a primary indicator of seasoned expertise.
That is a critical learning moment.
Junior managers often suffer from imposter syndrome, operating under the assumption that projecting absolute certainty is required to justify their position. They fake it.
Real experience in large, complex organizations teaches that unpredictability is the baseline.
Veteran leaders can stand before a room and state, "This is a highly uncertain situation," without perceiving it as a threat to their professional identity.
The anxiety surrounding uncertainty is frequently a symptom of systemic inexperience. However, Study 5 concludes with the data that perfectly encapsulates the self-serving bias inherent in human cognition.
This is the ultimate hypocrisy. The researchers forced the 301 managers to make a definitive choice regarding their preferred communication phrasing.
When asked how they prefer to phrase uncertainty, 62% opted for the external phrasing. It is uncertain.
A completely logical strategy to mitigate blame by attributing unpredictability to the environment.
But when asked how they preferred to phrase certainty, 63% opted for the internal phrasing. I'm certain.
It perfectly illustrates the self-serving bias. When outcomes are ambiguous and risk is high, the preference is to cite environmental chaos.
But when outcomes are clear and success is anticipated, the preference shifts to claiming personal intellectual superiority.
We aggressively seek ownership of our victories while outsourcing the blame for our doubts.
It is a highly rational strategy for professional survival within organizations that heavily penalize doubt. The managers are actively maximizing their competence signals while minimizing their exposure to blame.
The paper explicitly identifies this as self-serving thinking, taking credit for certainty while avoiding accountability for uncertainty.
As we synthesize the core components of this deep dive, Løhre and Teigen have provided a highly actionable framework for the science of communicating doubt. Let's distill the primary learning outcomes from the 5 studies for you.
Takeaway 1. The confidence heuristic dictates organizational reality. Certainty yields competence points. If genuine certainty exists, expressing it is highly advantageous.
However, unwarranted confidence carries severe long-term reputational risks if the underlying incompetence is exposed.
Takeaway 2. The strategic application of the grammar of doubt. When expressing uncertainty is unavoidable and the primary objective is preserving authority and competence, utilize external language. Stating, "It is uncertain," effectively attributes the unpredictability to the objective complexity of the environment.
Takeaway 3. Leveraging the honesty premium. When the primary objective is fostering deep interpersonal trust and demonstrating authentic warmth, utilize internal language. Stating, "I am uncertain," incurs a minor competence penalty but generates profound authenticity by acknowledging human limitation.
Takeaway 4. The decision avoidance loophole. When confronted with uncertainty and not constrained by immediate deadlines, the optimal maneuver is pausing to gather more information. Choosing not to choose while actively investigating effectively nullifies the competence penalty associated with uncertainty.
This raises an important question, one that extends beyond tactical linguistics and directly addresses the architecture of organizational culture.
The implications for how teams operate are massive.
We examine a paradox of prescribed optimism, the reality that humans actively penalize the transparency they consciously demand. We claim to value the truth, yet apply a competence penalty to individuals courageous enough to admit a knowledge deficit.
And as you go through your week, remember that listeners are not merely leaders. They are evaluators, peers, and participants in the environment that judges others.
The critical reflection is whether our own subconscious reliance on the confidence heuristic is creating an ecosystem where peers feel terrified to admit doubt. When a colleague or team member expresses genuine uncertainty, is the immediate subconscious reaction a judgment of their capability?
Or is their honesty rewarded? Continuously penalizing vulnerability forces the entire organizational structure to simulate a certainty that does not exist. Effective leadership requires not only the strategic communication of personal doubt, but the structural psychological safety required to receive the doubt of others without immediate penalty.
If the objective is to cultivate honest leadership and accurate data assessment, the systemic punishment of transparency must be addressed. We must learn to respect the cognitive space of, "I don't know."
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you walk away having learned a fundamentally new understanding of how cognitive heuristics process confidence, and with a highly practical toolkit for managing high-stakes communication. Observe the dynamics of the "I am" versus "it is" phrasing in your upcoming interactions, and closely monitor the subtle shifts in how that information is received. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and stay curious.